Simon, he's a fisherman. He's a son. He's a husband. He's kind of a nobody. He has limited skills. He's not real sure what direction his life is taking. And he was called far before he was ready. His name was changed to Cephas, which in Aramaic means the rock. But we just call him Peter. It is in his imperfection and his fear that Jesus calls him, not because he's unsure, but because he is eager for the world to be different. Simon's story begins on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, sea is probably a generous term for this body of water. It's 13 miles from north to south and 8 miles from east to west. It is surrounded by dormant volcanoes that rise up 1,600 feet over the banks of the shore. It is the world's lowest freshwater body. It is 700 feet below sea level. The sea is fed on the north side by the Jordan River, and it runs all the way through to exit on the south side. Now, Simon is from a town called Bethsaida on the east side of the sea. Directly across from Bethsaida, on the other side of the Jordan River, is the town of Galilee. This area has a dividing line right down the middle. There were two brothers, the sons of Herod, who controlled it. The east side is called Golan, and the west side was called Galilee. Simon is an Aramaic name, but it's his Hebrew name that I find interesting. It is Simon, son of Jonah. Yes, Peter's dad was named Jonah. How many jokes can we make about a fisherman named Jonah? But for Simon, fishing is central to life. It's his livelihood. It's what he's always known. But deeper than that, it's his connection to the generations that have gone before him. Former President Jimmy Carter said, "Many of the most highly publicized events of my presidency are not nearly as memorable or as significant as fishing with my dad." Who do you remember teaching you to fish? This is my daughter Nora with her grandpa when she caught a catfish. There is something that speaks to us, to the generations, of what it means to sit on a bank and fish, to just be with the world, to let it slow down, and to listen to the movement of the earth around us. But being a fisherman in Israel was not a glamorous life. The rest of society looked down on fishermen, not just because they were stinky and smelly, but because of the role fish played in this society. Everybody had beef or lamb that you could eat, but only the wealthy had fish, and only the super wealthy had fresh fish. Everyone else got fish that was salted or pickled or dried. And so the fishermen were looked down on because of the high prices they charged for their catch. In antiquity, fishing is not done with a reel or a pole. It was involving nets. Two boats would work collaboratively, and they would drag a net between them. The sails would provide them the power they needed to catch the fish. Now, fishing only happened at night because that's the optimal time to catch fish. During the day, the fish go into the deep part of the sea and down. It's at night they come into the shallows where it is easier to catch them with the nets. Scripture says that it was morning, and Jesus was teaching on the banks of the Sea of Galilee. Simon and his brother Andrew, alongside their fishing partners John and James, also known as the Thunder Brothers, were cleaning their nets so they wouldn't rot. Nets are essential for survival in this world. If you can't feed your family because your net has a hole in it, that's a gigantic problem. How many of you remember the United Methodist campaign in 2008 partnering with the United Nations called Nothing But Nets? Yeah, you remember this. We bought nets that would go to countries where malaria was a significant issue, and it would protect families. Well, we quickly learned that you couldn't just give a family one net. You had to give them 3 nets. The first net always goes to fishing. It was not used for malaria. It was used to feed their family. You always take care of your nets. Well, the crowd begins to squeeze Jesus between the people and the shore. And so he went over to Simon and said, "Hey, I'm going to get in your boat, and we're going to cast off a little from the shore." And Jesus continued to teach. Jesus then told Simon, "Row out further," even though he really didn't want to. I mean, Simon was done fishing for the day. He'd been up all night long. He was tired. His nets were clean. He just wanted to go home and go to bed. Simon cast his nets over the side, and they become so full they threaten to capsize the boat. And it's at this moment that Simon falls to his knees and declares he is unworthy. And it's at that moment Jesus says, "Don't be afraid. Now you will fish for people." This feeling of unworthiness is a central aspect of being called by God into the world. We are called even if we feel unworthy. In just the preceding passage of this in Luke chapter 4, Jesus was told he was unworthy. He stood before his church community. He declared he was the Messiah, and they said, "We don't think so." And they ran him out of Nazareth. And where did Jesus go? He went to Galilee. He went to the fishermen. He went to be with people who knew what it meant to feel unworthy, and he preached a message of hope and acceptance and love. Have you ever felt unworthy to a task in your life? Have you ever been vulnerable with someone and it wasn't received in the way you thought it would be? When I was 22, I stood before my church and I declared that I was called to the ministry, and someone said, "I'm just not sure you're holy enough or good enough to be a minister. You're just kind of normal." That's okay, because God calls all of us to get into the boat and to go into the deep sea and be with people. Jesus will empower everyone he takes into the deep to feel worthy, to feel the call as Peter felt it. This is our mission. Find those who feel unworthy and bring them into God's community. So go. Take your nets, cast them into the deep, and fish.